Okay, hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our workshop today. My name is Kate. I'm on the marketing team here at StackBlitz. This is our first webinar talking about this content, so I'm super, super excited. We have Eric and Dom with us today. We're going to be going through, web containers and AI stuff. For those of you who have not used Crowdcast before, the chat is on the right-hand side here. There's also a separate Q&A section for your questions. So if you have questions, throw them in the Q&A section, and we will answer those kind of throughout the presentation. And this will also be recorded and sent to everyone who has registered. So don't fret. We'll get the recording to y'all after the event. So with that, Eric and Dom, welcome to the stage.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Let's get some good vibes going in the chat. How's everyone's day going? Get some stuff posted in here. While you're doing that, I'll share some of the favorites that you're posting. But just quick introduction. So I'm Eric. I'm the co-founder, CEO of StackBlitz here. I am joined by Dominic Elm. He is the lead engineer of Web Container and of Bolt. At this moment, our servers are continuing to melt. We've been seeing crazy growth day over day. So that Dom is, we're lucky to have Dom here in one piece to be learning about how Bolt is built and how we can all build stuff with web containers and AI. But really excited to have all of you here for this workshop. So to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about today, I think there's three main things that we want to cover. And really the first thing is, kind of talking about why we built bolt.new, why we're excited about it, kind of like the origin stories and kind of what's coming next, just kind of a little quick recap on that. I think that might be of interest to some of y'all. The second thing that we want to talk about is how frontier AI models have changed the game for code generation. And for coding AI apps, there's a huge new opportunity of experiences that you can go and build now. And it pairs extremely well with our web container API, which is what Bolt is built with. And that's really kind of the magic sauce, so to speak, of why Bolt has been, I think, kind of this phenomenon over the past 6 days since we launched it, is the merger of AI and web container is just unbelievable, the sort of things you can do with it. And so what we want to do is just kind of talk a little through about what's going on in the AI world. The folks at Anthropic have actually made some content for us that we're going to be sharing with you all either during the talk here today or we'll share it with you afterwards about kind of what they've been doing on their side and how to use their APIs. And the third and the final thing is we're actually going to dig straight into the bolt.new code base that's up on GitHub. And we're going to be sitting here with Dom just kind of walking through how this thing works. And I'm actually pretty stoked for this because my biggest contributions to Bolt are not the code. So I'm actually going to be learning, as much as you all are. And so this is our opportunity to, sit with, the lead developer here on the bolt.new side and really understand deeply how this code base works and explore it together. And so kind of the format of this workshop is not like a step-by-step tutorial. This isn't really an architectural workshop. We want to really, at a higher level, really convey the things that we have learned building Bolt, the things we have learned building Web Container and integrating with AI models to enable you all to go and take that knowledge, take the bolt.new code base, and go and build some amazing stuff that blows people's minds. So that's kind of the agenda today. In the chat, I'm seeing some good vibes here. Folks are playing with the bolt.new API. Maybe not a good vibe. Sounds like Bolt maybe failed for someone. Just FYI, it's in beta. we are bug fixing 24/7 right now, especially with the amount of traffic that we're getting hammered with. Folks say that Bolt's beautiful. We appreciate the kind words. So with that, Don, what do you say? How will we get started here?
I think that sounds good. I'm ready.
Oh yeah. Cool. We're going to keep this very conversational, obviously. And so I want to encourage everyone, as we're chatting, feel free to put questions into the chat or in the Q&A section. We're going to be keeping an eye on that. Kate's actually going to be flagging stuff for us to go and answer. And that's really the point of this is you've got you've got folks that have been spending a lot of time building this type of AI code gen product here and building Bolt specifically. And so this is your opportunity to, we're sitting here live and we'd love to answer any questions you have. So please feel free to go ahead and throw it in the chat. Also, I love, whenever other products launch, I always kind of wish that there was like this sort of opportunity to sit down with like the people that are building and kind of hear an inside scoop. And this is like part of the reason we made the thing open source. The core components of it is like, we think it's super cool and we want to see more of this stuff happen, right? So, okay, so maybe to kick that off, Dom, let's talk about the origins of StackBlitz. There's three things today. One, origins of Bolt, kind of talking about that, why we're excited, kind of what's coming next. Two, what's going on with Frontier AI and how that pairs with web containers. And three, digging into bolt.new code base. So let's start with Bolt. I'm curious to hear from your point of view, the origin of the Bolt story, because I've got my own version, and maybe I'll do a revision on yours after I hear it. But I'm curious to hear your take on how this thing came to be, et cetera.
How this thing came to be together. That's interesting. Well, I think it actually comes a long way because like Bolt in like, the main thing that makes Bolt shine is actually web container, which allows us to run kind of like, full stack applications in the browser without actually using any cloud compute. And so I think that makes Bolt something unique because, well, we have the local compute, right? And so we actually came a very, very long way already because, we kind of created web container. Well, when did we launch this again? Was it 2021?
May of 2021.
Yeah. So in 2021, we actually announced web containers, right? So it's this Node.js runtime for the browser essentially. And you can run your full stack applications in the browser. And so we worked really hard on that technology already. And then I think we decided to, with the trend of AI, which obviously has a huge impact on everybody's daily life, because AI is integrated almost everywhere, and it's so like getting so deeply rooted, and it's so helpful. And I think that people just start to realize how useful it can be, not only to get started on new projects and just like almost stumping new projects out of the ground, but also like augment ourselves as developers and make us better developers. And so we kind of decided like, okay, that's actually a great combination. Like, what if we take web container and we try to elevate that with the help of AI? Like, I think that can be actually something really phenomenal, really something that is an unseen user experience almost to some degree. And so I think that's kind of the origin of Bolt.
Yeah, well, and I think Arno actually posted a message a couple minutes ago that kind of nails actually why web container is such a good fit for AI workloads. Is the AIs are very good at writing code, but like code by itself is not super useful without executing to see if it works, right? And be able to iterate on it. But now you're talking about how do you execute that code in a fast way and a secure way, and that's a huge problem. But it's a problem that we solved with web container. Like the benefit of web container. Compared to how if you've ever used any other online IDE, the way all the other things work is they have to spin up a VM for you in the cloud. Any code you're writing is like put on that VM. There's latency. You have to send it over the internet to the VM. It has to execute it, send it back. If there's something malicious in that code, you better hope your VMs are secured. Otherwise, it'll break out. People will mine Bitcoin on your servers, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of a nightmare. With web container, we're able to run all of the compute within the browser sandbox itself securely on your device, right? So when you boot a web container, like on this web page, right, when I like hit refresh here, it's just booting a web container. There's like an operating system with Node.js and NPM, et cetera. And the same with Bolt. When you load a Bolt project, it's booting up a micro operating system in milliseconds within the browser sandbox. So even if malicious code is put in it, it can't break out to the rest of the machine, right? So security has always been a first and foremost consideration for us, because when StackBlitz.com has like 3 million developers a month that use it. Securing tens or hundreds of millions of developer environments that are getting spun up is a nightmare of a challenge, especially if you want low latency. You want it to be done at a low price point that's palatable, when you put in your credit card or whatever. So anyways, we spent if half a decade has gone into web container at this point, and then it took us multiple years even to get an alpha of the thing out the door. But this is deep technology that's really hard to build. And so, as the AI wave kind of hit, for a while we were very interested in the idea. We actually, this is kind of inside scoop. Earlier this year, we actually built a prototype of, it was called Bolt, and same product idea. The models at that time weren't good enough to output code reliably, and so we put that project back on the shelf. And then back in May, June, we got a little early peek at some of the stuff Anthropic was up to with Sonnet 3.5, which is this kind of maybe a natural segue here into the second thing we're talking about today, which is kind of web containers plus AI. But in the past couple of months, there's been just a complete upending of AI models in the frontier AI model research labs. Anthropic specifically has done some incredible work making AI models that are very, very good at writing code, like zero shot. And so Sonnet 3.5 is the first of these models that has really come out. And this is why a lot of coding tools in the past couple of months, there's this explosion of like Cursor and V0 and now Bolt and this sort of thing. What's going on here is the models under the hood improved that made these sorts of products a lot more viable than they would have been before. And because again, it doesn't matter how good you can execute code. Like, it doesn't matter how good web container is or a VM or your local machine. If the AI is punching out code that's like garbage, that's not going to run, it's a waste of your time to have the AI punch out code. That's not true anymore. The code coming out is good. As for those of you that try bolt.new, you know what we're talking about. And the stuff is only getting better. And so that's kind of, I think the big tectonic shift that when we saw that, we pulled bolt.new off the shelf and we said, okay, we're gonna go and build this. And I remember Dom, you had the prototype within like a couple of weeks. I remember when we used that. Alex, who's our chief of staff, he's kind of the generalist. He's not an engineer at our company. He got his hands on that, like the 2-week-old version of it. And he spent 6 hours building a website for his Airbnb listings or something that's like deployed to prod, and that's kind of when I think we started, okay, this is interesting. You know what I mean? There's so I'll kind of pause there.
Huge potential, right? Especially because costs are decreasing. And performance and quality of these models increase. So while at the same time these LLMs become more affordable, it just makes even more sense to hop on that wave and try to build like great products using AI.
100%. And so I guess as far as the future of Bolt, maybe Dom, maybe we can kind of give some hints or sneak peeks at kind of where we're going with this thing, generally speaking.
Sure. So I mean, we're working. Yeah. We're working really, really hard. So I think there's already like a whole bunch of things which. So I think Eric, I don't know, was it mentioned already? So bolt.new, basically at least the core of it is open source. So you can find it on GitHub. We're gonna take a look at the code base and we're gonna explore it a bit together. But essentially, that's just the core. So it really shows how you can build AI agents using Web Container API, and that's just a beautiful magic combination here. So we're going to take a look at that. But then on production, if you noticed, I don't know, for those that actually checked out the code and ran it themselves, you notice there's a whole bunch of features which aren't necessarily part of the core because it just serves as a baseboard example. But yeah, there's so much stuff that we're working on really hard. Trying to increase trying to decrease latency. So trying to get the model spit out code even faster to improve the overall, not only perceived performance, but also actual performance. What else?
I think a couple things come to mind, like immediate ones that we're working on are we've dropped some new stuff today that should improve token usage and increase the accuracy of Bolt a bit. Tomorrow we're going to be dropping a PR, and this is Dom's actually been leading the work on both of these. The one dropping tomorrow is going to reduce tokens even more. So you'll be able to. What that means is the free tier page, you'll be able to send more messages with the same limits than you were previously. And so right now we're solving a lot of P0s. And actually, let me go. I'm going to put the tweet thread I made in chat of kind of like where we're currently at with this, just so that if you all haven't seen it, you're kind of aware. Our team is scrambling jets to get stuff solved right now. For example, another thing landing today, if you have run out of tokens, you need more tokens, you can just top up, buy more tokens, $10 per million, or sorry, $10 per 10 million. So that's that sort of stuff. And I think generally where we are taking Bolt is, I mean, it's really a continuation of the vision that we've always had for StackBlitz. It's like, if you have an idea, we want StackBlitz and Bolt to be the fastest place to get your idea into your fingertips through the keyboard and get a response back, all the way from idea to production. And with StackBlitz, we did that with just a web-based IDE, and obviously Bolt has taken that to a whole different abstraction layer, right? And so a lot of the things we've been building in StackBlitz for the past 5, 6, 7 years here, all of that stuff is going to be coming to Bolt. The ability to create repos, the ability to commit to repos, the ability to deploy, the ability to like it's not, we have grander ambitions than just spinning out something a little demo POC app, but something that's really a meaningful power tool that you can use all the way through your entire development cycle. I mean, even today we have people telling us they're deploying real websites, from Bolt to Netlify, that they're getting put in behind a domain, and like they're live, right? So this is just the beginning of that, and we have so much more that's kind of coming down the pipe for that end of things. Cool.
Yeah, just maybe to reiterate, and maybe to be like a little bit more specific. So essentially, what we're currently working on is optimizing token usage. Again, I think that's what Eric said. We're trying to improve performance, improving latency, and something that's gonna come at. I know we're listening to feedback very, very closely. So the feedback from everyone in the community and everyone that uses Bolt is super important to us. And so versioning and rollbacks is something that will definitely come, and we're trying to improve the whole error handling and all of that. So because that at the end of the day, in my opinion, is also what makes Bolt something unique. Because if an error happens, like a lot of people, or even myself, sometimes I'm like, okay, what do I do? I open up Google, I Google for the error, and try to find out what I have to do exactly to fix it. But Bolt can automatically fix it for you. And we're trying to extend those capabilities to terminal errors, like all of that stuff. So there's a whole bunch of new features that are coming to everyone. So it's very exciting.
Yeah.
There's a couple questions here already. Do you have a feature request page is one of the questions.
Yeah, I think so our GitHub repo is probably the best place for that. So feel free to file an issue. I think that'd be the best way to do a feature request. I don't know if we have a tag in GitHub yet, but if not, someone from
we
the
could use discussions actually for that.
Or discussions would be good actually.
Because you can upvote very easily.
Yep. Start a discussion on the Git right now. We'll go ahead and post the repo here. Oh, Tomek already did. Thank you, Tomek, from the StackBlitz side.
Awesome. Another question we got in. Is it realistic that we will also be able to run Python-based frameworks inside web containers in the near future?
Maybe not near, but well, it depends on the definition of near, I suppose. But Don, why don't you take this one?
Well, I say Python frameworks, yeah, near. I mean, I think Eric hit the nail on the head. I think that's like Python. So what I will say is that Web Container does have Python support. We have announced that at VConf last year, since we introduced WASI support for Web Container as well. So Python is basically powered by WASI. So we do have Python support. It's beta, experimental, but if you just stick to vanilla Python apps, you can pretty much do that even in Web Container, and using Bolt, and you can run Python from the terminal and just have it spit out Python. When it comes to frameworks, that is a different story. Then I think that will definitely be a little bit down the road, like not near future.
Totally, yeah, and I think we'll have more to share. I mean, I think right now we are drowning in the current demand of just Node.js based stuff and just kind of stabilizing this. And so I think that's part. By the way, we are hiring. Maybe a relevant call out. We've had a lot of folks I think come in, but if you let me get our careers page here. If you are interested in working on web container stuff, this would be a fantastic time to come and take a look at opportunities at StackBlitz. There is a lot of cool stuff going on. Some of which I wish I could actually talk about, but we'd love to chat. So anyways, take a look at our careers page. We are fully remote, so we are not doing return to office. I'm personally, I've got a kid and
We're not.
wife.
I don't have to fly to San Francisco every day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, get on a boat and come to San Francisco.
Boat.
we can't afford a plane, so you gotta like set sail. Anyways, check out our careers page. I totally forgot the question that was asked. No apologies on the little side header. Oh, right, we were talking about Python. So I'll say this: there's a very tangible path here of as Bolt stabilizes in the Node ecosystem, we've already got some initial work on some of these other ones, and there's going to be more that comes there. I think it's really just a question of timing at this point. Yeah, we're expanding the team. We're stoked about it. But yeah, I saw another question. Okay, maybe you can. What other questions have come up here?
Yes. So there's actually one I really want to read here. Is your long-term vision for Bolt/AI programming to eventually remove the need for the developer to write any code at all?
No. Like the point of AI, at least in our view, the point of AI is not to replace developers. AI allows you to turn one keystroke you would have to type manually normally, but it turns out what the output of that is 1,000 keystrokes. That's the value that AI brings. It's just as important as ever that someone who is a smart engineer is sitting at the keyboard typing commands, like instructing how the software is built. We see this as entirely augmenting developers. And now what I will say though is that by having a higher abstraction layer, it allows people that are wouldn't classify themselves as engineers per se, quote unquote, to be able to actually build real applications. We've already seen this happen with Bolt today. People that are posting on Twitter, etc. There's a sales guy who made a site for his daughter with Bolt. So I think that if you kind of think about the progression of things like image editing, before Photoshop, it was way more complicated. There's a very small number of people that could really produce really crazy images. That when Photoshop came out, suddenly there's an entire new larger audience of folks that could do that. I think that's kind of the double-edged the two sides of the coin that are both great here is engineers are going to get even further and further more effective and be able to build way more complicated, way bigger, way more sophisticated things. And people that are not, kind of day-to-day engineers or whatever are going to be able to leverage these tools to go and build stuff they never would have been able to in the first place. Right. So we see this as purely good things and purely things that are not like replacing people. It's just accelerating the heck out of what people can do. So.
Awesome. A couple more questions. I'm just going to keep firing away here. What are the frameworks supported by Bolt currently?
Frameworks, we have pretty broad support of the Node.js ecosystem. You name a Node.js framework, it almost certainly runs in web containers. So anything that's Vite powered, like SvelteKit or Solid Start or Remix or etc. I need custom Vite config you have. Webpack. And kind of the Webpack ecosystem works. Next.js works. Nest.js works. If you go to StackBlitz.com, it's any of the project starters you see there. Those all work. And there's a heck of a lot of them. Yeah, very, very broad support in the Node.js ecosystem.
Excellent. Okay, there was a question. Let me find it. Sorry. Clarifying. Okay, I would love for you to give a small example slash explanation of what the Access External APIs feature in Bolt's Pro pricing refers to. Can we currently actually access externally hosted APIs from inside the Bolt web container already? And is there a way to make Bolt aware of APIs we'd like to use?
I think do you have the course proxy turned on Bolt?
On Bolt, I mean,
I'm gonna need to double check.
well,
I
the
think that
cost proxy. Well, it depends. It depends on like your subscription, right? Because like the cost proxy
oh I
that
see.
we,
Oh,
the
got it,
cost
got it,
proxy is
got it.
not enabled for everyone. So but
Got it.
yeah, Eric, so what Eric's saying is for web container, obviously, because web container runs entirely in the browser, we're kind of limited by CORS, right? So that browsers can't make any requests to any backend service, which is why for web container, we have shipped a feature which is the CORS proxy, which yeah, is enabled for web container, but it's tied to like the subscription, your plan, and then you can enable it or not. But yeah.
Got it. And I think so. I think right now, and this is actually a good point of feedback for us, is I'm not sure in StackBlitz.com, if you have the paid subscription, the same when you're buying for Bolt, you can access APIs that normally you couldn't access from a browser. There's like for example, if you wanted to ping the Anthropic API, they do not allow you to do that from a browser. Like Cores will disable it, but in StackBlitz, we allow you to do that. I believe on the Bolt side, I need to double check. I don't know if we've rolled out our Cores proxy on the Bolt side, but I believe if we haven't, that's in the queue to ship imminently. But anyways, just you can try out the Cores proxy in StackBlitz now, and then we're going to be rolling that out to Bolt shortly.
Excellent. This one, I'm a solopreneur and I need to access GitHub from Bolt. What type of subscription should I choose?
So today we just announced today or yesterday, you can open public repos, like small to medium sized public repos in Bolt. It's actually the coolest thing ever. Let me go ahead and pull up a quick demo here. This is just the beginning, by the way. We've got a lot more plans for Git and things like Git, like committing to Git and stuff like that. But let me go ahead and pull up. Pull up nightly. Hang on one second. Apologies on this. All right. So if you are looking at a repo, let me share my screen. If you're looking at a repo, you're like, hey, this is cool. So this is like Starlight. This is a docs site that is powered by Astro. Like it's a generator, so you can kind of create your own doc sites. If you're looking at a repo and even in a subfold of a repo, you can open it in Bolt, any public repo, by just adding bolt.new in front of the URL there and hit enter. It'll go ahead and just suck that in, pull it in, boot the thing up, and give it a second to start it up. And then I can actually just start prompting this thing and start making my own doc site. So I can say make this a doc site for bolt.new, a new service from StackBlitz for coding with AI. And it'll go in, it'll just start figuring out what to do here. It's going to update the content, etc. We'll let it run. But anyways, so it's super cool. Basically, you can open up a repo, you can prompt it, you can ask questions about the code base, like, hey, how does this thing work? Right? But I think it's like awesome because like whenever you start a project like this, there's always this stuff that you have to update and whatnot, where it's like the title, getting rid of all the default placeholder content, blah 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 blah. It's nice, it just kind of punches out some examples, of like how this thing's laid out. So if you're starting a blog or a doc site or whatever have you, or if you want to just open a repo of like you're learning a framework, it's super nice to be able to kind of crack it open in Bolt, ask it some questions, see it do its thing, and let's see. Let me go ahead and. Oh no, there's an error. Let's see if it can figure out what to do with it. anyways, you get the idea. But yeah, hey, so that's how you open stuff in Bolt, and we'll see if this thing fixes. But there we go. Cool. Boom. So now we've got, look at that, bolt.new doc site. Pretty wild. This stuff isn't in the training data either. This is just off the cuff, hallucinated into existence. Cool. Anyways, all right. What other questions we got?
One was how much coffee do you drink, Eric? That was questions.
Not enough. There's always more. Always more to be enjoyed.
Is there going to be a Mac native IDE with Bolt?
I don't know. I mean, I won't say no. I think browsers are cool though, man. I like just being able to crack this open, in a browser is sick. So I think it's pretty magic. We'll see. The future's long. I did just see a question about downloading code. We're going to probably add a button here in Bolt, but just so that you're aware, what you can do, you can open it in StackBlitz, any project, and then there's a little download button here that you can hit. When you download that, it downloads it to your to a zip file. Sorry, and you can also just push directly to a Git repo too. Yeah.
Can I push commits from Bolt?
Not from Bolt, but you can do that in StackBlitz. In StackBlitz, there's a Git integration, so you can keep editing, etc. But we've got lots of Git plans for Bolt.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
It looks like we have there's a technical question here. When importing an existing GitHub repo, how does Bolt currently handle building the relevant knowledge of the repo contents? Since you said it works for small, medium repos, is the entire repo content passed in as context, or do you have a vector db/reg implementation in the background to only add relevant files to the context for questioning?
Dom, I think we currently pull in pretty much all the files. We strip out like binaries and stuff, right? And
yeah, there's a couple of hidden files that are not passed in into the context window, but essentially it's the entire repository.
Yeah, we've got some stuff. We'll be able to open this up for even bigger repos as well. Pretty soon. We actually landed some stuff today that will allow us to increase the limit here. So you'll be able to pull in pretty large size repos and work on them with full context. So cool. Okay, maybe I want to dig into the technical stuff for those that want to we walk through the Bolt code base. Kate, are there any other questions in the Q&A that we should hit now, or maybe we can save some for later?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, let's save them for later. Yeah, folks, you can put your question in the Q&A. We'll hit them at the end.
Amazing. Okay. All right, Dom. Show us the code. Show us the code. Show us the secret sauce that's public and open source already on GitHub.
Public and open source sounds good. Share screen. That's good. All righty.
Okay, so this is the part I've been personally crazy excited about because I want to understand how the heck this thing was built and how it works. So Dom, maybe just give us a 0 to 60 of just high level. How is the sausage made? How is the sausage made and cooked and prepared? And tell us about that German sauerkraut you threw on this thing too.
Sauerkraut. Oh, I actually love sauerkraut. Yeah. Anyways,
you're German, I would imagine.
Right. Makes sense. So, I think the most fundamental thing about any of these AI products is in the system prompt. I guess that's where it all starts, because the system prompt is kind of like the instructions you give to the LLM, which are, well, not what you're sending it, right? It's not your request. You're saying, build me a blog, but then you somehow need to give the model some kind of instructions on how to behave. It's almost like a rule book of some kind. So the system prompt is where, where all the quality comes from and where you define all the behavior. And so for Bolt, I suppose we could start there, I guess, if we really just want to talk about the sauce here and how the meat is cooked here. Then we have a file called prompts. Let's see. Let me close this terminal. So I think first off, this is a pretty long system prompt, and we worked on this for a while. We've been adjusting that very, very frequently, trying to get it to behave exactly how we want. And so this is the most fundamental piece to build any of these AI products. And so I'm just going to scroll through. We went through a couple of iterations with Bolt. I think there's multiple different approaches you can take, because these LLMs, there's something called function calls, or some call it tool use. So there you can either say like, okay, you build a fully autonomous agent that can call these tools. So essentially like reading files, making them capable of reading files, writing files, and all of that stuff. But that involves like multiple round trips from model to client, which is kind of like slow. So fun fact is that's how Bolt started. Like we used tool calls in the beginning, but then really quickly realized that it's pretty slow. So it's a jarring user experience, and we just have to make this a lot faster. And so that's when we got inspired by like existing AI tools such as Claude Artifacts, which comes to mind. And so we kind of created our own system prompt to get the LLM to create artifacts, except that we define artifacts in a slightly different way. Because an artifact, you can think of an artifact, and that's the heart of Bolt. In Bolt, so when you go to the chat and you ask something, and you see this like little box in the chat message in the assistant response, that is that's what we call artifact, right? Like the little thing you probably all know. Wait, let me just show you. So if I say build me a snake game, and I hit enter, right? I should start the app. Okay. All right, let's try it again. Oh, we have it. Make me a space invader. Let me click on that example. So you can see the AI is responding in a streaming fashion. Everything is being streamed to the client. So you can see this box, right? And that's what we call an artifact. An artifact is comprised of different actions, and those actions is something that will be executed in that container, in the web container. So you can see we have, or at least today we have, well, we actually have a few, but the most important actions are file actions and shell actions. And you can already see, wait, audio is not working? Am I reading something?
You're good.
Is it all working?
I think it's a local issue.
Okay, so well, you can always stop me if you have any questions, but like this is an artifact, and like we get the model to basically create this artifact, we give it instructions, and then we pass in as context. Well, today on production, we pass in we basically start off not entirely on a white piece of paper, but we start with a template so that, you know, the model doesn't have to recreate everything from scratch, but we just give it a couple of files, which it will likely need, and then it can just start modifying existing files. Anyways, this is an artifact. And so like it's creating a package JSON. The action then contains like the full file content. It has a shell action to then execute stuff here. Well, we don't show the output here because that's just the core of Bolt. But on production, it's slightly different. But yeah, essentially that's kind of the most fundamental piece. Does that make sense? Are there any questions?
Yeah, why don't we pause there? Because this might be a little bit of a mind bender what we're looking at here, and it's like it's not code, it's human language. You know, like that's the hard thing about these prompts is it's like kind of different than looking at code. It's like, okay, yeah, if this, then that, while the, you know what I mean? It's like this is it's kind of like it, but it's like, you know, prompting is an art form, right? And by the way, I just want to point out something really cool. Dom is and has my full permission to be doing this. Dom's telling you exactly that, you know, how we're doing this in our prod site, and no one else is talking about how they're building AI apps right now and like sharing this knowledge. So I just kind of warms my heart that it's like we're kind of this is such gold. Wish we had this information 60, 90 days ago as we were kind of building this stuff. So just want to flag that. Like this is cool stuff. And I'm happy you all are here to be hearing it, because there's not many other places I think you probably go to get this info at this point. So anyways, over to you.
Yeah, I said I don't know actually where to continue. Let me think. So
Well, you got a couple
like
questions
I just
already.
recommend. Yeah. So what I want to say is like again, I think the prompt engineering is so critical, not only for the performance of the model and also the quality, but it's kind of like again, it's how you it's the rule book that the playbook in football, American football, that kind of describes exactly like what kind of plays you have, right? And like if this then that, but except that it's not code, but it's just like natural language. And so I really recommend everyone to take a look at prompt engineering and try to look at the prompt, which is fully open source. Just have a look at it and like try to study it a little bit. And if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. But yeah, I basically just gave you an overview of kind of the core of it.
Totally. So some questions just from the chat. Can it be adapted to use in your own internal tools and run it locally? This prompt, I think the answer is yes, totally. Like you can piecemeal out the various parts of the prompt that are relevant to what you're trying to do. But yeah.
There's one. When do you think the checkpoints and chat history feature will be available so we can request changes to certain parts of the code?
Yeah, checkpoints, chat history. We are targeting. I think realistically targeting that one next week. We've been scrambling to get the token reloading stuff landed this week, and we're landing the token optimizations. So we're hoping next week is when we're planning to have those two things landed.
Is the system prompt just a single string? Do the tags mean anything in the system prompt?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, it's just text. You just pass it. So the way these APIs work, just for everyone in this workshop, it is pretty much stateless, right? So essentially, you're just always passing it an array or a list of messages, and that list of messages contains everything. Like your request, it contains the system prompt and everything, except that every message has a certain role. So it can be of type user, it can be of type system, it can be of type user, system, assistant. And assistant is then, of course, like, when the model is actually giving us back a response. And these tags is actually, that's something that is also covered in, I think, prompt engineering on the Entropic docs or something. Like, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be in an XML format. It can be like actually pretty conversational if you want. But it's just, like a lot of testing and iterations on the system prompt just, has showed us that what we have actually works really well.
And Dom, you should unshare your screen for just 1 second, because there's a question here about, because I'm going to share my tab. With such a huge system prompt, will the token pricing per request be huge? The answer is no, because of, and in the case of Anthropic, which is the model that we're using here, they have their pricing. So this is all, there's the way that these things work is there's input tokens, which is what you are putting into the LLM, and that's like the system prompt, what the user is telling it to do, And then there's output tokens, which is like, that's what the code coming back from the AI that you're going to put into, the file system, whatever, right? Output tokens are the most expensive part of the deal at $15 per million. Input tokens, just regular, if you just put regular input, is $3 per million. Oops, $3 per million, so cheaper. Now, Anthropic, I think it was like a month ago, they rolled out prompt for input caching. And so you can actually, with what would normally be a normal input message, you can actually say, hey, for an extra 75 cents, you can cache it. And any reads in the future from that are priced at 30 cents per million, which is a huge drop, right? So anytime you send future messages, all of the stuff that was sent previously that was cached is 30 cents per million. So this is extremely useful for your system prompt. Extremely useful. So you can have a very, very large system prompt, and that is not going to be getting billed at the $3 per million. That's going to be getting billed always at this 30 cents per million, except for when you do the initial write. But 75 cents extra to get you're talking about, over 10x difference here on the pricing, right? So so you want to make sure that you're caching the system prompt and any other things that in the conversation are going to be getting referenced over and over and over, right? So yes, hopefully that kind of answers that question. Let's see what other questions we got here.
Yeah, and I think on the caching, actually, one thing that I want to mention is that it's pretty cool. Like it is cached across all users, right? Because that cache is tied to an organization. So we have the StackBlitz organization, like a StackBlitz account at Entropic, and so which means that the cache is bound to the organization, which then means if we cache the system from once, it's cached for every user. So every user that goes to bolt.new and sends a new message, it will result in a cache read on almost what currently I think our production system prompt has 8,000 tokens, and that is quite a lot.
Totally. And we're getting some questions on, is caching limited? I can't represent Anthropic here, but I'm not aware of limitations on the cache. I think there's a minimum size of what you can cache. I want to say like there's something like that. I'd have to look it up, but I'm not aware, I don't think, of other limitations.
Same.
Cool. Okay. Dom, I'll let you reshare your screen here.
Are there any other questions? Oh, fuck. Oopsie.
Simon said, does that also count for my code base? I imagine it's like maybe the code going in. You can cache, like if you want to cache the file system. The thing is the file system is going to change as the edits it. So you kind of have to, and this is what we're like a lot of our we're landing are kind of some of the our initial smarter stabs at doing caching a file system, but with updates, etc. But yeah.
Yeah, you have pretty fine-grained control over how many save points and that in terms of caching you create. So you can cache on certain messages, but then if they change, it will result in another cache write. So you should use it when you actually know that something will not change like very frequently. Unless because a cache write is more expensive at the end of the day. So yeah.
So walk us through this maybe a little bit more. So this is the prompt. High level, what are the important things in there?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what's in this prompt that's important to kind of be aware of?
In this prompt. Okay, so I think at the beginning, I think what's important is like for web containers specifically, because we operate in a web container, which has some limitations just because it's like a sandbox. For instance, it has limited Python support. So we're giving it a couple of system constraints. For instance, currently, you can't run any G++ or any C++ compiler, for instance. We also say that we want to prefer Vite, for instance, instead of implementing. Like, there's a whole bunch of like constraints that we have here. We give it the available shell commands, for instance. We have some section on like full code formatting, which isn't very important here. We tell it essentially which elements are allowed when it generates any responses. We have a diff spec, which essentially is used, like it's the GNU unified diff format, essentially, that your people are familiar with if you do a git diff, for instance, for like anything that involves diffs. And then I think the secret sauce is the artifact info, because here we basically describe exactly what an artifact is, what an artifact is comprised of. For example, you can see it's like shell commands to include dependencies to install using a package manager. We say it's npm, although you can use any. Web containers support npm, yarn, pnpm. We just kind of defaulted to npm for this one here. There's files to create and their contents, folders to create if necessary, while it won't create any folders, but technically, because it has the ability to run any shell commands, essentially, which I want to mention again, because web containers run entirely in your browser, which is a security sandbox. I just want to mention that again. It's entirely secure, right? It's not like this thing operates on your local machine and you're giving it full control over your terminal, and it can do whatever it wants. It can remove like the root. No. That's not possible. That's the beauty of web container, because it's fully sandboxed. it cannot break anything because it cannot escape that sandbox. And it's designed in a very secure way, on different domains and whatever have you, to, rule out any security concerns, essentially. So we're fine giving it like full control over a terminal. It cannot break anything. It cannot ruin anything other than maybe breaking your application. Okay, but then you're one click away from a reload and everything is fine again. So I think that's very important to emphasize here with web containers. Yeah, and then another important aspect is the artifact instructions, and that's essentially where all the instructions go or can be found for a single artifact. And that includes, for instance, we definitely wanted to think holistically, look at all the files that exist, etc. We tell it what the current working directory is. We give it more instructions. I think we don't have to go like through every bullet point here, but essentially we're just describing what is an artifact, what are shell actions, what are file actions, what exactly can you do, and how do you behave in certain cases, right? So that I don't know, the order, for instance, of actions is important. So we have instructions on that, so that we try to have it execute and npm install as soon as possible, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that's pretty much an artifact. And then another very important thing to point out is, as part of the system prompt, so you can highly regulate the quality of the output by giving it a lot of examples. I think examples is kind of what underpins all of this, because you can describe what an artifact is, and you can describe like, yeah, I got a shell action, I got a file action, I got X, Y, and Z, I got all of these things. But then what does that actually mean? How does that look if a user comes in and says, can you help me create a JavaScript function to calculate a factorial of a number? Okay, cool. What does that mean in terms of the assistant response? And that's part of this example. We tell it very specifically, if this is the user query, then this is what we expect you to generate, or the LLM in that case. I'm kind of humanizing it. But it has some text, and then this is what an artifact is. It has an ID, it has a title, which we've seen on the page. It's kind of rendered here. The ID is invisible, but then it's comprised of multiple actions. And once all of that is like transferred over to the client, then we're just parsing that. And that's another central piece of Bolt, because it has a streaming parser that takes all of that as it comes in from the server, and it tries to make sense of it. It tries to parse it as it's coming in, and it's executing these actions in the container, in web container. And so yeah, these are all the examples, and we have a couple of them here. I would say the more examples you give it, generally, the better. So, and it's also pretty important, because that's kind of like, since you cannot really, we're using Sonnet 3.5, you cannot fine-tune the model at this point. It's not possible. But what's possible is to give the model a whole bunch of examples. That is one way, and you can cache them. You can even put them, well, it's part of the system prompt, so it is cached. But the more examples you give them, accurate examples, like examples that are really correct, because if you have mistakes there, then the model, you cannot expect to give it wrong examples and then to spit out correct code. So yeah, I think that's kind of like the last piece of this system prompt.
One random question that was posted above, people are asking about when they open a project in StackBlitz from Bolt and then they connect to Git repo, the Bolt project can no longer connect to that StackBlitz project to push the repo. That's currently correct. We're gonna be closing the loop on that. But right now, yeah, you can't currently have a connected StackBlitz and Bolt project that's also connected to a repo. We have them detached, but that's coming shortly.
Cool. Alrighty. let's maybe
So yeah,
what do we
maybe
talk about
walk us.
next?
Yeah, I think at least for me, like okay, so there's a great prompt. Walk us high level. Okay, so like something has to like parse this. Like when you're like it's we're telling the LLM to do something, right? And maybe like let's step back to the application. Where are we like booting web container slash how is this like getting parsed and like stuff thrown into the web container, command started, killed, whatever, right? Just high level, just kind of where are these things happening, just so we get an idea of where they are.
Well, web container is booted once you so there's a web container folder in lib app lib web container and it's in index.ts. That's essentially on page load. We're loading web container, at least if it's not server-side rendered. So we boot web container, and this is using web container API, right? Which everyone can use. Highly recommend to play around with it and build on top of it. It's pretty fun. And so we pass in a working dir, and this is essentially this is where a web container is booted. So we're booting it as soon as possible when the page loads. And so we put that then kind of into a variable here that we can then access pretty much like everywhere in the client. It's just like a separate module that contains the instance of web container. And then there is essentially components, chat client. So this uses, what I want to mention is for this application to use Remix. And if you wonder why there's like these, client suffixes here, and there's like also a .server that may look strange at first, that's because some stuff is server-side rendered, and if you include a .client suffix, then essentially that can only be loaded on the client. So you can kind of control what is loaded on the client, what is loaded on the server, and that you can control a little bit of the server bundle. And because if you would import something that can only be imported, actually, if you import something in a server file which can only be imported on the client, then that basically will result in undefined. So it's not going to pull in anything. And that's just a small side note here. So in chat client, what we have, let me go down. So we have so we have a hook that is called use message parser. And if I click on that, and you see it's a little bit, well, because it's pretty big. But this is the piece that takes the streamed data from the client, from the server, and parses it and passes it through a streaming parser. I think I don't have to show the exact implementation of this. If anyone is interested, feel free to take a look. But essentially what this parser does is, I think it's pretty clever to some degree, because what we're getting back is HTML. Well, XML, because we have these bolt artifacts in it, but it can also potentially contain other things. So what it does, I hope people are interested in this. If not, I can also just continue somewhere else. But I just wanted to quickly explain kind of like what it does on a high level, because it buffers the input as it's coming in, and it waits until it can actually certainly rule out it's not a bolt artifact. And only then it will be rendered, because we're rendering the streamed response as well at the same time, if that makes sense. So like if I have something like this, or hello world, something like that, right? And that is passed into the streaming parser, it would immediately spit that out. And it can be rendered then as part of the message that we see in the chat. But if we have something like that, it will only render hello world. So what we can see there is hello world in the chat, but it will kind of buffer the bow XML tag, because it does not know if that's going to be like a bolt artifact or if it's not. And if I had bop, then what we'll render is exactly this. But if I had bool, then again, we would just be rendering hello world. So it's kind of like smart, because it internally buffers stuff and tries to rule out if certain tags are known by us or not, and so on and so forth. And so this parser has a couple of hooks, like on artifact open, on artifact close, on action open, and on action close. And you can maybe already see how stuff is being executed. So when the response is being streamed from the server side to the client, it is all passed through the streaming parser, which is a very central piece. And the streaming parser then looks at it, and as soon as it has a fully closed opening tag of a bolt artifact, like that's a fully an open tag, then this hook will be called. It gets like all the attributes on that tag. We show the workbench, which is kind of like the whole thing on the right is what we call the workbench, which has the editor, the terminal, the preview, etc. And we keep track of the artifact. Because we know, okay, there's going to be an artifact. We put that somewhere in the store. And then it keeps parsing. The on artifact close is just the very last thing. Because if you remember from the system prompt, there's going to be bolt actions as part of the bolt artifact. And so what's going to be called next is the on action open. And you can already see we have a bit of instrumentation here. So we can, during development, we can log these out. But then if it's... So one thing to mention here is for anything that is not a shell action, as the code says here, we're adding the action immediately. Otherwise, and that is because, the comment says, for shell actions, basically the content is kind of like, well, it's in between the tags. So the shell action is really only added once we see the closing tag, because only then we know kind of like what the command is. We can't really stream that. We need to know the full command, if that makes sense. Yeah, and then otherwise we're adding actions. So if it's a shell action, we add that to the store. Just think of it as a map of actions. So it kind of knows, okay, these are the actions, unique. And then once the action is closed, we kick it off and we run it. And that's where all of this comes in. So like once this action is closed. So what I'll say is adding it means we can already render it in the UI. That's why we can already show an action, even though we don't know when it's ended and when the end will come, but we can already show something in the UI as soon as possible, as fast as possible, because that's what makes a great experience. I want to see this thing as soon as possible. And so once I have an open tag of an action, I can immediately render it. But I can only execute it once I have the content of it. And so that's the open and close.
So Dom,
I'll pause here because maybe there's some questions then.
Yeah, if there's any questions, happy to answer. But I think the flip side of this is you've done, I think, a great job describing, okay, like how we've gone over, okay, how Anthropic's API kind of works, what we're getting back, how we're parsing that. And then now when you actually, how does that, let's look at web containers. So like as from my perspective, basics of how are we spinning up the web container, whether it's in Bolt or if I want to do it outside, like how the basics of how to boot a web container. And then how are these commands getting put in? How's the file system being updated when we're getting the stuff back from the AI, right? So I think that's the final missing piece here of like kind of how the whole thing is made.
I was actually going to go next there because that's the natural next step, because now that we're adding them, we're rendering them in UI, and once they're closed, these actions, we run them, and running them depends on what type of action it is. So if I click on run, then we can see, yeah, it takes some action callback and we get the action. And then there's something that we call is the actions runner. And so it calls run on the actions runner. And then here's kind of like, why we can ignore all of that, update action and then execute action. It grabs the action ID. So let's go here real quick. So this is where I think the most important thing is. We kind of switch over the type of this action. Is it a shell action? Then we know we have to execute it in a terminal, or we have to spawn a new process. If it's a file action, well, then we run that file action. Let's take a look at the file action, because I think that's the easiest. Well, all we have to do in order to run that, because the web container is something that stays live, right? So once I call and let me go back to web container index here. Once I call web container boot, and you can find that in the docs, right? So you just call it once. What you get back is a promise because it's asynchronous. So you have to wait for it to boot. And the return value of that is the web container instance. And if I would go here and say web container dot, you can already see that's the public API, which you can also find in our docs. So there's an FS. If I say FS, I have a couple of options. I can create directories, I can read files, read directories, rename, and etc. etc. Or I can do I can spawn new processes, which is just a child process essentially, right? Like Node.js child process. Or I can tear it down. So coming back to our action, in case of a file action, all we do, and I hope all of this kind of makes sense now that it falls into place here. But for a file action, all we have to do is, because we know it is a file somewhere, so we're creating kind of like all the directories to that path. And then essentially we just call write file. That's how files get updated in web containers. So every time there's a file action, all we do is we make sure that all the right directories exist in that path, and we just simply call write file.
And for those that might be familiar with because web container is kind of like this very unusual JavaScript library thing, because typically when you look at it, install something for npm, it's using a browser, it's got some sort of DOM either on it. It's I don't know. There's kind of a standard shape of these things. What's weird about web containers is you kind of got to think about it. It's an operating system. It's an API to an operating system that you're spawning within the browser. And so a very direct analogy is if you've ever built an Electron app, an Electron is Chromium plus Node.js. So you can use Node.js APIs for writing to the file system, spawning shell commands, right? And obviously Chromium is what you get in a normal browser, but by combining these two things, you get this very powerful surface now to create very sophisticated types of applications. And so you can really think of the web container API is kind of it's almost a polyfill for the delta of what Electron is versus a regular web app. You get an operating system that's sandboxed that browser app with full FS access, etc. But think of it as just it's the Node.js API in your browser, right? So that's in a nutshell kind of a good frame of reference of how to think about it,
Yep. Very true. Yeah. So, going back, the shell action, since we only have these two types, there's shell action, and a shell action is really, in this particular case, what we do is we call spawn. And here's actually the cool thing. Spawn can be, you can run anything. JSH is actually our internal shell. We call it JSH, similar to ZSH or Bash. JSH is mimicking ZSH, kind of. So yeah, that's our internal shell. So essentially what we do is we have a flag to just execute a single command. So we basically spawn a shell, and in that shell, we run the command that was part of that bolt action, right? If you remember that, the bolt action would be something like this. Bolt action type shell, and then, for instance, I don't know, node index.js. So that would be the content here, and we just simply pass that into the shell. It's being executed in a shell. It is a shell because then you can kind of interact with it. It takes standard in and all of that stuff. So it behaves like a normal shell, as if I just open up a terminal here. I have a full terminal in which we run that. So yeah, like that. And yeah, that's kind of it. And then we just wait for it. And in Bolt, it's these actions are all executed sequentially because they can depend on each other. So we can't just run everything randomly in parallel. I think that's just gonna cause more issues. So yeah, I think that's kind of the heart of it, if that makes sense, and how stuff is being updated in web container and how we run essentially like these commands.
Totally. And one question is, how full features is JSH compared to like CSH? Would it have most of the commands you'd look for?
Well, I think that really depends on the command. It is not fully featured. For instance, we don't have, what we don't have yet is like full, like, like for loops and all of that stuff. So most basic commands should be there in JSH.
And if not, go ahead and file an
back,
issue on our web container repo, because like we're constantly adding to it. And just like for web container, we had to really build our own micro operating system, to make it fast. Because when you kind of go and like pull in, there's a lot of things out there. So someone's asking, is web container open source? The answer is no, but the stuff it's built on is, and there's tons of open source stuff out there for like, you can take an entire Docker image and compile it to Wasm and like run it in a browser. The problem is that pulling in an entire like Linux distro plus all this other stuff really bloats it and it slows down the speed. And so what we've had to do is like we've just written our own kernel and our own shell and to be extremely lean, extremely small, really for the purposes of what people are using StackBlitz for, because this is not a general purpose operating system. This is a developer oriented environment, right? And so that's just kind of give you an idea. Like there's tons of stuff out there that you can use that, like in some cases, some of the stuff is more powerful than what a web container could do, right? But the trade-off is the speed, the latency, the CPU and memory usage of like what you're trying to do, right? So that's just kind of like a high level overview of like what the other things out there are that can kind of do what you're looking at here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Love the idea.
So do you have
go ahead.
Any other questions? Oh no, sorry. What?
There's a really cool idea, and this is actually something we've thought about. Is there anything planned, like validation circles for code from responses? Like you take the response for something that's TypeScript, put it through TSC or TSLint in the background, and then only accept what the LLM's giving back once it passed that 100%, right? And so like we're definitely interested in this active line of research for us. The trick with this stuff is it's very easy to end up in infinite loops, where the end users, and we're already having problems with this, where we're doing token reloads for folks because there's, they hit something that's just, burning through their tokens because the LLM, for whatever reason, is not able to solve it. Once you introduce that sort of thing, it's got to be darn good and it's got to be interruptible. Otherwise, tokens will be burned, money will be lost, people are sad, understandably. And so the approach we've currently taken is we really want the human to be in the loop every step and saying, and at a minimum, just clicking the fix it button until it's freaking fixed, because it at least prevents, a while loop of money drain happening, but yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
And there was a story about this shirt, by the way, everyone. So like, if we have time, I'll tell you about it, because I'll make a special offer to anyone that's on this webinar too, for stuff we're going to be launching. But okay, before we get to that though, puppies will die. I hope no puppies will die. Yeah, and one thing too to mention about web containers, this all because we're kind of talking about like how does is it all in the browser? Is there actually is a meaningful server side aspect to this, which is when you run npm install, that is not going to the npm registry directly. Like we actually designed web containers, like the file system of web containers is designed to be able to pull in very large amounts of data extremely quickly. And that's important because we're installing stuff from npm. You can be installing hundreds of megs or gigs of data. And doing that in a browser, there's been previous science projects in the past that have done this, and it takes like 10 times longer than your local machine is. And so we had to design a file system that would work in browser that could pull in massive amounts of data, ideally like 5-10 times faster than it can do on local. But that actually requires us to have server proxies that we're running that are when you install packages, it's not going to npm, it's going to our servers, which are pulling down those packages, converting them into a format, and that can be sent down and immediately sucked in insanely quickly. and also removing a lot of stuff in these packages to reduce the file size to make it smaller payloads, faster download speeds, right? And so we're doing, I think on the order of tens or hundreds of terabytes a month of data transfer on this stuff, for our npm infrastructure. We're doing this for Git repos as well. We're doing this for CORS proxy. There's actually the networking aspect of this. You have to have servers to do that. A lot of these things are CORS protected, so even if you want to connect to them, they would not work. So there is a server-side aspect, and that's why. So for open source projects, we let it be free. We want people to build stuff that's cool, make it open source. If you want to use this for a product, we've got like a paid plan that gives you, basically unlimited access to that infra. We charge on a per invocation of web container, effectively. Pretty reasonable. It's like, I think for $200 a month, you get like, I can pull up our pricing here. Something that a lot of traffic. If you kind of compare this to like that cost of running VMs, it's insane. So for web containers, $200 a month gets you 100,000 API sessions per month. So the 100,000 web containers. I'll tell you, go to the AWS price calculator, put in the cost of even the smallest EC2 box you can find, multiply it by 100,000 for an average duration of 5 minutes or something. That number is nuts. So anyways, just want to kind of give you a heads up on that. Heck yeah. Yes, Bolt merch store coming. Definitely coming. Okay. Any other questions on the Bolt side of things, etc.?
We have a couple questions. I think we have about 15 minutes left in our scheduled program here. Maybe we ask a couple questions and then Eric can close us out with t-shirt story time. Awesome. Will you add any other deploy options?
Like to different providers?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's something we're definitely looking into. Yeah, we're already chatting with a couple of different of the usual suspects you could imagine. So yeah, that's definitely coming. I mean, we're also this one's kind of public because there were some tweets that went back and forth. But I think there's probably a pretty cool integration with Supabase we're going to do coming into the product where just in Bolt you'll be able to auth with Supabase, spin up DBs, run the migrations for you. Like instead of Bolt telling you go and add this row, go do da-da-da, it just automatically do it for you. So there's a lot more coming to the deploy to production part that's not even just hosting, but it's also database and auth and dot.
Excellent. There's been a number of questions about like chat prompt saving and then being able to save previous chats. If you just want to address that as a whole.
100%. Yeah, that is. I think I linked the tweet earlier. I'll link it again, but that is one of our P0s here. Landing next week is our target. Chat persistence and checkpoints of the file systems you can roll back to a previous point in the chat. 100%. Like it was, we cringed when we launched Bolt because there was a couple of major things we were like, oh God, I wish we were able to get this in before the release. This is one of them. This is probably one of the biggest ones, actually. Probably the number one. Yeah, anyways, this is coming. I personally am just like, I want it so bad. We are all on the same page here. This has got to land as fast as possible. And shout out to the team. People have just been, everyone on the team has just been pushing. It's crazy hard. Crazy hard. Like I know, like personally, I was at my desk for 21 hours a day for 3 or 4 days straight till the launch, and then after people are online almost 24 hours a day. It is wild. So we have not expected the amount of growth we're seeing. So we appreciate the patience because every day we're waking up and seeing a heck of a lot more people than the day before, and that's kind of been the story for the past 6 days, and which we're flattered and kind of floored by. So.
Awesome. I don't know if we have time to get to everyone's questions, but I'm going to throw everyone's Twitter handles in the chat here. If feel free to ping us any questions you have. Yeah, Eric, do you want to closing remarks here?
Yeah. So the T-shirt thing. I think that's maybe the last thing. I wasn't actually planning to talk about this, so hang on, I'm getting kind of the demo pulled up here. Actually, looks like there's some. Yes. So folks that are out of credits, we are landing token reloading today. Today. Mark my words. I'm going to eat my shoe if I go back to our Slack channel and they're like, we hit a bug, it can't land today. But like, I'm committing. This thing's landing by the end of the day. I will personally be grinding to get this down. Token reloading, you're going to be able to, like, when you hit the bottom of your tokens, you can do a one-time payment. We are going to also, it's going to be priced the same as a subscription, $10 per 10 million. You can buy in any increment of 10. We are also going to be rolling out higher subscription plans where right now we have $9 a month or $10 or whatever for 10 million. We're going to also have higher options. I believe we finalized in the pricing at like 29, 49, and 99, which will at each jump you actually get more tokens. Like there's a discount on them. So if you're using a lot of tokens and you're loving this, you can go to one of those. If you don't, that's fine. You'll still be able to buy one time if you're just like, oh, I only need 10 million tokens for this month or something, whatever. The subscription stuff is going to be landing. We're pushing to get it out by the end of the week. Might be early next week just because we've got a mental health day for the company on Friday, much needed. But anyway, so you might slip into Monday. What I will say, and this is this is off the cuff. I had no plan to show you all this, but I think it's cool, and I think it'll kind of tie in. So the shirt. This is like a couple of years ago. Had the idea for this thing. And earlier this year, we announced this, and we as a company, a developer company, we'll go to conferences or like when people sign up for our Teams plan or whatever have you. We want to send them a T-shirt, right? That's like kind of cool, and like not just like a logo, And so we were like, well, what would be cool? And so this T-shirt is not like any ordinary T-shirt, and that is because everything that you see here is actually valid JavaScript code. This is real valid JavaScript, and you kind of see. It's hard for me. I've got a desk here, but every single line here is actually real valid JavaScript code. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to kind of show you what I mean here. Give me one sec. I'm going to pull this up. Okay, so you should see. This is what is on my T-shirt, all right? So you can kind of zoom in. You can see, hopefully, the individual lines of code here, right? Every single line is valid. Okay, because again, this is JavaScript. Every return statement, you can't have a return statement in the middle of, the I and the F in an if statement. So like this, every line's valid. What's cool? So what does this code do? Okay, very cool. It's valid. What does it do? Well, this is actually self-rendering. This is the first ever, as far as I'm aware, self-rendering T-shirt. You can copy and paste this code, put it into any JavaScript console. So all the code is here. I'm just going to hit enter. And it actually, the code of the shirt itself, this image, is the code used to render the image. This is what's called a quine in programming. So as you're walking around with the shirt on, you're actually running a program on your chest, which is kind of cool. So anyway, so here's the thing. I believe we have a shop where you can technically buy these. Someone actually bought one the other day. We were like, it wasn't kind of intentional. When we roll out our subscription plans, later this week or early next, if you buy one of the higher tier ones, let's just call it the $50 or $100 a month one. Send me an email at eric@stackblitz.com, and we'll give you a link to get one of these shirts sent to you if you think this stuff's cool. So anyway, so that's the story of the shirt. Mystery solved. And okay, funny enough, like I said, I came up with the idea for this shirt a couple of years ago. No LLM, actually. This was me. I had the idea on a flight to a vacation. It was like a 5-hour flight, and nice thing is StackBlitz, because it runs in your browser, works without internet. Had nothing else better to do. I had an itch to scratch with this, and I manually got every single line to render. I did try putting this through the latest LLMs. They couldn't do it. So it's kind of circling back to the question of, is AI going to replace us as programmers? The answer is definitely no, because if you're making quines that go on a T-shirt, we're still going to be in business for that stuff. But anyways, yes, I literally wrote this by hand. I'll have to find my wife got a picture of me, just like after 5 hours of grinding on this thing, and I'm just like, I look like I'm just destroyed. Like it was like when you change one thing in it, it would break all the other lines. So it's just kind of this like Jenga game of like getting every line to eval, But anyways, enough said. Fun stuff. So yeah, if you sign up for one of the higher tier subscription plans, shoot me an email. I think Kate just put it down there. I will send you one of these t-shirts for free as a part of that. So anyways, just want to throw that out there. Looks like we're almost at time. So are there any last questions you have for Dom or I here? We appreciate you coming, by the way. This has been a lot of fun. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully it was good. I think we'll probably do more of these as we roll out stuff for Bolt and kind of talk about how we built it and what's coming next. But Kate, how are we looking on Q&A?
Q&A. Let's see. Actually, we do have a couple more. I think we have some time for a few more. Can I integrate Bolt into my app as a micro front end?
Probably. You'll need to like not out of the box, like the open source code base, but like you could certainly strip out the parts you need and compile it, I think.
This one was when you were doing your demo, Dom. How does it know when to execute a terminal command?
Because it's a bolt action of type shell. Essentially, the model will decide when to do that. Given all the examples in the system prompt, it kind of has, a good sense of when to run certain shell commands because we have instructions for that, and yeah.
Awesome. Let's see here. I'm wondering if there will be a feature to include my own component library or internal packages to be used.
Definitely. Yeah, if it's not, if your stuff isn't on NPM right now, like public NPM, current Bolt cannot do that. However, StackBlitz itself, our core IDE product, has the ability to connect to private registries, et cetera, on Teams plans, and Bolt will be getting that capability as well. So this is going to be coming, in a future update here, hopefully sooner rather than later. Again, we're just keeping the lights on right now, just staying above water and not drowning. That's kind of the current priority. I imagine over the coming couple of weeks here, we're going to get to a good spot. A lot of bugs fixed, a lot of reliability improved, And then again, if you kind of look at the StackBlitz IDE feature set, connecting to private NPM registries, connecting to private repos, committing to private repos, forking repos, sharing stuff with your teammates, all that stuff. We got it. We built it. It's all ready to rock and roll. It's coming to Bolt. And you saw the first of that. And that's actually why we're going to be able to ship a lot of stuff really quickly here, just in a breakneck speed, is because we've had this stuff in prod, a lot of this stuff for years. And so bringing it into Bolt is there's new challenges, but it's not like net new work, right? That we have to do. We can leverage a lot of our existing technology, our existing, scaling profiles of these things and security models of them, and then apply them over in Bolt, right? So things are going to be improving quickly and rapidly from here.
Awesome. Is there an example in the repo or docs of how to add your own actions?
An example in the system prompt, I think there's a section on types of actions. So you could potentially just add another block which describes a new type of action. So you can just add it there, and then it would need to be handled somewhere in the parser or kind of like the actions runner, and then you can execute whatever you want when it would generate those actions. Again, important is just that you provide enough examples and so that it actually knows what these actions are for.
Amazing. Okay, I think that brings us to time. I just want to remind everyone that we will be sending out the recording of this as well, so everyone will get the link for the recording. Awesome.
Yeah, last thing, someone just posted in the chat. They created a Dom versus Eric game using Bolt. This warms my heart. Let me do find a little screen share. I don't know what this game does. Hopefully this is appropriate for work. If not, I'm so sorry. What we're about to see is user-generated content. We take no responsibility for this content on our platform nor this live stream, but let's go. Okay, new Battle of Wits. Ooh. Oh, I think the image is broken, but we have a game. Look at this.
Tic-tac-toe? Is that tic-tac-toe?
Made a noise. I don't know if you heard that. I just like made this noise. Love it. That's amazing. That's so cool. I like, wow. Cool. Thank you. I'm going to be playing this all day. Let's go. Love it. Heck yeah. Okay. Thank you all for attending. We really appreciate it. We just hit time. As always, if you want to contact us, I am at Eric Simons 40 on Twitter. I'll go ahead and post my handle here. Feel free to tweet me, DM me, etc. And I'll go ahead and post Dom's as well. And pull up, he's at LMD. But feel free to grab us. And again, this was recorded, so if you want to come back to it and relive the awesomeness that was this hour and a half, it'll be here, forever. So good stuff. All right, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day. Can't wait to see what you build. Make sure to share it on Twitter.